They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I agree. When you can give someone an image to connect with or think about, it lasts much longer than your words. Additionally, as you've already learned in this class, statistics show that 65% of people are visual learners. They learn best through images. So when a public speaker can add images, whether verbal imagery or actual visuals, to their speeches, the speeches are much better received and remembered by their audiences. For your rehearsed speeches, both informative and persuasion, you are required to have a visual aid. With this requirement, please keep in mind first and foremost, visual aids are not for you, the speaker. They are for your audience. Again, visuals are for your audience. This fact should drive your decisions on what type of visual aid you create for use, the size of the visual, the font and the font size used on the visual, the amount of text or number of images used on your visual, the professionalism and visual interest of the visual, how long you display the visual, and where you are looking and speaking when using the visual aid. So here are some tips and guidelines for creating and using your visual aid. Tip number 1. When using visual aids in a speech, always remember the aid part. They are only helpers. You should never rely on your visual aids to deliver the message to the audience. You are the message. The visual aid just helps you. If you answer no to one or both of the following questions, your visual aid is probably not appropriate for the speech. Question number 1. Does the visual help my audience to better understand the content? Or question number 2, does this visual help me better communicate the content? Let me give you 2 examples that might help you with this idea. Let's say a speaker is speaking and says in her speech, perhaps this pie graph can help. Then flashes the pie graph at the audience, as long as I did for you just now, then moves on with her speech. Has the visual aided in helping to explain the information to the audience? Absolutely not. You have no idea what this graph was, why it was shown, or what information was included on it. Furthermore, the text was too small and the graph was never explained. Yes, the speaker showed a visual, but it did not serve the purpose of a visual aid because it did not help the speaker to better explain the information or the audience to better understand the information. Instead, the speaker could use the visual like this. Facebook, while growing in use among older people, like sadly our parents and grandparents, is used most widely by 18 to 25-year-olds at 30%, followed by 26 to 34-year-olds at 24%, according to InsideFacebook.com, which is a research website that tracks Facebook users for marketers and developers. Our age group, 13 to 17-year-olds, makes up only 10% of Facebook users. Additionally, according to the same website, Facebook is used most widely by people in Iceland, Norway, Canada, and other cold places according to the same website. 49.5% of Iceland's population is actively using Facebook, followed by 45.4% of Norway's population. Apparently, cold weather, which is a factor that drives people indoors, also drives people onto Facebook. Here's another example. Let's say a speaker is doing a speech on the history of Wrigley's gum, and for his visual aid, he brings in a pack of gum and shows it to his audience. Okay, let's get real here. Does a high school student already know what a pack of Wrigley gum looks like? If so, then has the visual helped the audience to better understand information? Or has it helped the speaker to better communicate it? Absolutely not. Props are not visual aids, they're just something to look at. Make sure your visual aid actually aids in understanding on your topic. Tip number 2, make sure your visual aid doesn't distract from what the speaker is saying. Remember, visuals are very powerful. People are drawn to them more than words. Why do you think that movies are more popular with your generation than books, and YouTube is more popular than letters or journals, and picture messages are more popular than simple texting? Because visuals will always trump the spoken or written word, make sure you don't choose or create a visual that causes your audience to stop listening to you in order to look at and decipher the visual. Here's some examples. Maybe your visual is too texty. There's just too much to read, and so your audience gets lost in reading the visual rather than listening to you. This cartoon illustrates how an audience can feel when there's too much text in a PowerPoint, or any other visual for that matter, or when the visual isn't used as an aid, but rather as the message itself. Maybe the text on your visual is too small, and so the audience is straining to read the visual or see the images rather than listening to you. Maybe you've brought in pictures and passed them around. Whenever this happens, the audience is paying more attention to checking out the pictures and talking to their neighbor about the pictures than they are to you. Maybe you have a beautiful visual that is just the right size, not too much text, and properly displayed, but the visual isn't used until three-quarters of the way through your speech. The audience is going to be checking out the visual the whole time and wondering when you're going to use it, rather than listening to you. An easy solution to this is to have your visual covered up or turned around when not in use. Making sure your visual isn't a distraction is important when public speaking. Make sure you take the right steps to have a non-distracting visual that you use well in your speech. Tip number 3. When using a visual aid in your speech, focus on the audience while using the visual. This means that if you're using PowerPoint or a poster board or video clip, you're not turned away from your audience while reading the PowerPoint or poster or talking toward the projection screen. An easy solution to not having to turn around toward your PowerPoint is to print out the PowerPoint slides and have them with your speaking notes. That way you don't have to turn around every time you change your slide. Tip number 4. Presenting lots of statistics or numbers, especially when they're all at once, is generally a time when audiences will tune you out. Make a graph or visual representation of the numbers or statistics. It will keep the audience's attention better, and it will help them connect better with the real meaning of the numbers. Tip number 5. Make sure your visual looks professional. Slapping something on a poster board may have worked in elementary or middle school, but it's not appropriate for a formal speech at the high school level. If you're not talented with visuals, find someone who will help you. Remember, when you're speaking, everything you show an audience, from your smile to your stance to your clothes to your visual, tells them something about you and whether or not they should listen or take you seriously. Tip number 6. When using visual aids in a speech, always practice the speech with the visual aids. I cannot emphasize this enough. There's scarcely a worst-case speech scenario than the one where the speaker is trying to figure out how the equipment works as he or she is giving the speech, or when slides or overheads or visuals are out of order, upside down, or missing, or when a program, video, or PowerPoint won't properly load onto the speaking computer, or when the poster board you created keeps curling up when you're trying to use it because you rolled it up on the bus, or when you completely forget to use your visual at all during your speech because you didn't rehearse with it. The best way to avoid these embarrassing and potentially speech-destroying scenarios is to actually use the device, equipment, or visual during your speech in one or more of your practice speeches. Don't even take a large pad of paper or easel for granted. Pens run dry. Easels may not hold your visual correctly. It's amazing what can go wrong when you haven't prepared or rehearsed for it. Keeping these tips and guidelines in mind when preparing and implementing your visual aid in your speech can help to create a more vibrant, professional, and visually appealing message for your audience. Remember, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Make sure yours count.